Okay, so welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. With me is Mr. Daniel Ebbett. He's the founder of Block Blue Light, a premium supplier of blue light and artificial blocking products based out of New Zealand and Australia. But you guys ship worldwide, from my understanding. Daniel, appreciate you taking the time and joining me.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Scott, and looking forward to getting in and sharing some knowledge on all things light and health, and
Yeah,
how we can, yeah,
it's pretty amazing to me that I feel like we've gone full circle in health, where I think we're coming back to all like the foundations. As much as there's tech to track all the things and do all the you know deep analysis, it still seems to come back to a lot of the foundations of just living life, and light being one of the more prominent ones around that. And that's kind of your own personal story, from my understanding, as well as not just the company you started up, but maybe give a little background on yourself, on kind of how all that came to be part of your story.
yeah, sure. And I'll just add to like your comment on like the going to the back to the fundamentals of health, and I think it's becoming more. We really need to start looking to that. The more we become disconnected from
Mm-hmm.
the natural world as we evolve into this technological age, right? That's as we are becoming so much more disconnected from nature. So I think that's why fundamentally we're seeing the move back to chronic disease and has been formed by literally the disconnect from that. So moving back to it is where we start to see health come back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. But yeah, bit about me. Yeah, my story started about it's about 8, 9 years ago. I graduated university and I moved over to Sydney, Australia to start the corporate dream, to climb the corporate ladder in IT. And prior to that, I had already had a passion for health and wellness, um, really got into fitness and powerlifting, and I was doing that at a competitive level. And so naturally with that came the involvement of understanding and learning about diet and all that. But my knowledge of health back then, as with many people, was like the pillars of health are diet and exercise. And so I was like, as long as I do those things right, I'll be healthy.
Sure.
But I soon quickly realized when I started my new job in the city, working in a high rise or in a corporate job, um, my health really started to deteriorate. And I was still exercising, I was still eating healthy, so I couldn't quite work out what was going on. And essentially, I was working under fluorescent lighting. I was on screens all day, and then I would then go from work and I'd go to the gym at about 6 p.m. at night. It was already nighttime there under fluorescent lights in the gym, and then I'd come home, and then I'd have to do work out of hours because the graduate in IT gets lumped with all the out of hour work at like midnight sort of thing. So within the space of like 2 to 3 months, I started to get severe insomnia and severe migraine attacks during the day. And I did what most people would do, is I went to my GP, my doctor, to try and understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that model, that system just looks for band-aid solutions. So I was just fed a whole cocktail of different prescription medications, from antipsychotics to antidepressants to
Oh,
all
wow.
sorts of different things. And they made me feel horrible. So they would sedate me, but that's about all they would do. They wouldn't actually give me restorative and restful sleep. So I'd wake up actually feeling more drugged and
Yeah.
just spaced out. And yeah, so I really started to spiral downhill. Obviously, sleep deprivation, unable to focus during the day with migraines, and in a new job trying to build a career and it just, things really started to fall apart for me. I had to actually give up going to the gym and training, and yeah, I literally got to the point where I think the doctors were trying to tell me like it's just in your head sort of thing, that there isn't like a problem, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense with my analytical mind, literally I have for my job. I'm like, I was building and understanding IT systems. I was like, well, maybe I needed to try and understand the human system, right, to work out what there's something wrong in the system here, because the things don't just happen. Like I was fine and now I'm not. So I just had enough of all that. So I like to say I like fired my doctor. I was like, I'm not going back there. I'm not touching those medications anymore. And so I just really started to try and problem solve and understand what's going on. And I stumbled upon a neurosurgeon in the US called Dr. Jack Cruz,
Yeah.
and he had some very this is before people even really knew who he was, because obviously a few people know who he is now and the things he talks about.
Yeah.
But I was looking at his stuff about 7, 8 years ago, and um yeah, it just really, like, I just went down the rabbit hole of trying to, like, the stuff he talks about. It's very hard to digest. It's very complex, but he really starts talking about pillars of health being light, water, and magnetism.
Hmm.
Not about food so much. So there's a big quote he said, and it stuck with me, that I read, was like, health is about light, it's not about food. And
Interesting.
because and the idea behind that was not saying that like food isn't important, but there's so many diet gurus and food gurus around talking about like paleo or carnivore or this or that or carbs, and it's like all that doesn't is so insignificant when your light environment and other things that are impacting your biology are just completely disregarded. And
Sure.
and for me, I was like, oh well, holy, that's me. Like all I'm focusing on, like maybe I'm not dieting enough, or maybe I'm not. Yeah, that's maybe why I'm not healthy. I'm not
Yeah.
doing enough of the stuff that makes you healthy. And yeah, so from that point, what I actually did is, one of the big takeaways from that was um how artificial light impacts us and the disconnect from getting natural full spectrum light. And I was like, well, that's me. I'm just now indoors all the time. I'm on screens all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and this is 8 years ago. Tech wasn't that big then. Like we didn't have, so things like the iPhone 2 was out then. We didn't have tablets and all the big screens and LEDs everywhere. But it was already still affecting me. And so what I did is I ordered a set of these big, giant, like welding safety glasses off Amazon that showed that they could remove a significant portion of the blue light spectrum, which through learning Jack's work, was blue light was the heavy spectrum that we were getting indoors, and it was
Mhm.
having all these detrimental effects. So I got them, literally wearing them in the office, like these giant. People just thought I was like nuts. Like they're like, what, who is this guy? Like he
It's like
hasn't
you
even worked.
see older folks with the big glasses that like cover the sides and the tops and below, and it's like these big goggle things.
Yep. Yep.
Oh
So
man.
that was just me in like a full open office, just like on my computer. Like it's like, man, the things you do for health, right? I was like, I don't care what you guys think. My like trying to get better is more important.
Yeah.
So from that, and that was just literally an experiment. I was like, hey, I'm willing to try anything. So within the space of about 3 months, I had reversed insomnia, reversed migraines, and I was just, and then it was a bit of a journey back from that, because it was about a good year and a half of insomnia to try and reverse sleep deprivation and the hormonal profile effects. But eventually, I returned to optimal health, and from that point, I was like, not that I wanted to start a business on it. I was just like, I was like, I don't want people to go through that pain like that
Yeah.
I went through, like, because literally people would go down that route of the medication and stuff, and they would just stay on that cycle of like, well, I guess that's what I have to do, right? And I was like, well, something so simple, but people don't know about it. So I just started buying those glasses. I put a website together in the early days of e-commerce, and then just started selling them. I still continued to work my career in IT for the last 8 years as well. And then just over that time, I've just built up a business around trying to empower people and educate people on the topic, and then provide them with the solutions to embed into their lifestyles to live healthier lifestyles as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that last part of the broader comparable mission. Same reason for this, mine more on the burnout side. And it sounded like you were kind of experiencing a lot of that burnout too, not just from the lighting, but also the lifestyle, the
Mm.
lifestyle. But no, I appreciate your passion for health and really driving into something that, I think, to me, it's like probably a great opportunity to get people healthier quicker because it's a passive approach, meaning you can get things for your screens, for your phones, you can throw in some glasses and impact your health pretty considerably, right? It's not like you have to go walk 100 miles or whatever, the 10,000 steps a day, but you can still have a significant impact on your health.
Yeah, and that's what I've really started to look at things and go, it's not about all these things you have to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
about looking at how we live our lives and how we can integrate different things into it that passively
Yeah.
help you be healthier. So for example, like a really good example is all the lighting in our homes now. In the last 5 years, there was a big shift from the older incandescent halogen light source to the LED light source,
Yep.
and it has significant detrimental biological impacts on us being under that type of lighting all day. So a simple thing like moving to a healthier type of lighting,
Yeah.
still using LED, but just specific lighting like we create that we've tried to design. Well, you don't have to do it. You still just turn on your lights, and now you benefit. It's an investment. It's not, you're not buying the light bulb. You're buying the better sleep, the better health, and how you feel. And that's really what we're trying to show people is like, I'm not trying to sell you a product. I'm trying to help you understand
Yeah.
how this different lighting is actually having different impacts on you, and then here's a solution that will passively help you in your daily lifestyle to mitigate that.
Yeah. Because I mean, you got to think about, like you mentioned earlier, when you started this and you were feeling it, even before we even have the bulk of what we have from a technological standpoint, we even have exponentially more screens, right? I mean, I think everybody has like 3 or 4 screens individually. So before it was like you barely had one and it was an older version. Now we've got multiple, right? I mean, I even sit with 4 screens. I've got 2 laptops, I've got 2 phones, and that's just me. And then I've got other people in my house,
Mm.
right? And that impact, let alone the lighting, and even the negative consequence of, I like the education piece, is we're sitting here passively receiving this negative thing, and we're not accounting for that as an impact because it's just a light bulb.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is like it's been an interesting thing to watch in the last 7 years from when we started to now. So certainly like 7 years ago when I decided to put up a website, start selling these, and start talking about the problem, which was far less of a problem back then than it is today. I was kind of seemed like a bit of a crazy guy. Like they're like, you're nuts. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And you fast forward to today, it is much more prominently known. Hey, like, there's such a thing as like, digital detoxes and like
Mm,
knowing like too much screen time is actually going to affect you.
yeah.
But the interesting thing now is it's like the screens is not the only thing now. It's like it's infiltrated our lives in so many different places that people don't quite realize how prominent the lighting is. So car headlights, street headlights now,
Yeah.
all the street lights are all LED. All the shops you go into, like that's just and the fridge, even you just open your fridge and it's
Mhm.
just so it's really
Schools.
um yeah. And so it's a very difficult world to live in now to say, hey, I'm just going to avoid all that because you won't have much of a life if you try to do that. So it's about going, hey, I'm not going to go move into the like middle of nowhere where there's no electricity
Right.
but it's like how can I interface with the world we live in and make sure that hey, like it's not going to detrimentally affect my health if I don't have awareness of it. So
Yeah.
it's like have awareness and then work out how can I actually look at different ways to interface in with the world we now live in.
Yeah. Because this tech isn't going away. We just
Mm.
have to figure out how to do it better. And like you said, acknowledge the aware, or become acknowledgeable, or awareness that it is and can have a negative impact on you and has to be accounted for. And the thing is, I'm wondering what your opinion is, like going back to the doctor's discussion, like when is that going to get into the conversation in the medical field that they're accounting for that? And you know what I mean? Like from a solutioning standpoint.
I think we're a while away, in all honesty. From watching what's certainly going along in the industry now. So for example, a common thing we have is we'll have customers come to us and go, so a big one is like the optometry field, which
Hmm.
I'm not debating or anything. They are certainly experts at eyes and in that field, but that they'll tell people or patients, like for example, oh no, there's no research on blue light being detrimental to the eyes or your sleep. There's no issues with it. And it actually quite shocks me because there actually is a lot of research. Yes, it's probably, it's not ancient research. It is all newer research because there wasn't any research. If you go back 10 years, there isn't any, it's all coming out now. Like there's really good pieces of research that have come out in like 10, 20 from 2008 to about up until today. So the only thing I can think of is these guys are studied in their field, they're experts, but they studied a long time ago before the digital age was a thing. So they're saying, well, when I studied and I looked at research, there wasn't any research on it. But there's a whole host of it now. Like we have a page on our website called Science, and I literally break down a very fraction of research on different areas as well, going, okay, how does blue light impact our eyes? How is it impacting
Hmm.
our overall health? How is it impacting our sleep? Different aspects of lighting, like what's flicker doing to our health. And so there is research, but from the medical field, I don't think they've caught up to current research yet, unfortunately.
So how do you equip? Sounds like education is a key element to what you're doing. Picking one of those things on the research aspect, um, you know, to inform and educate people on the impact of poor lighting and what those unintended consequences could be.
It's about, I think the best way that we think it is to obviously look at the research, us, and understand it, but then try to try to break it down in a way that the average person can just really understand it, because it can get a little bit overwhelming. Like, I don't understand like all these different things you're talking about. So
Yeah.
we're just trying to break it down into so simple terms that you're like, okay, I can understand. Like a really common one is like, okay, like how does blue light affect our sleep? Was a common one, like, and it's like if we and so if we break that down into such a simple level that people go, oh yeah, well I get that, makes sense, right? So like so this one is quite an easy one. It's so blue light's found in nature, it's good for us, it's balanced, it's from the sun. The sun emits blue light, it also emits all the other colors of the spectrum. The sun sets, all the blue light in the environment's gone. We've evolved in a way. So if you go back even thousands of years, we used fire as a light source and a heat source.
Hmm.
So fire is red, orange, and yellow hues. There's no blue or green in it. And then from a biological standpoint, in our eyes, we've got particular receptors that will activate under blue light. So they activate under blue light. It sends a signal to our brain to increase our wakefulness hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, to keep us awake during the day. So our brain knows it's the daytime through blue light. That's a very basic way that that's brought into the eyes, into the brain,
Hmm.
raises up hormones to keep you awake. You know it's awake. What happens now is the sun sets, we turn on all our lights because we don't live in the dark. So all the lights come on, the devices come out in the evening, TVs, phones, very, very high in a narrow spectrum of blue light. So our brains don't know the difference between that blue light and blue light from the sun. We've got a biological brain that is designed to go blue light means wakefulness. So the way it simulates that is it keeps our cortisol and adrenaline elevated through into the night and will suppress sleep hormone melatonin, which is actually going to make you go to sleep and wind down and relax. So most people can get that. They're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm just literally artificially creating daytime in my home at nighttime, and you know, our biology is not caught up to technology that we use to go, oh yeah, no, that's not the sun, that's just those artificial lights. So yeah, so unfortunately, that's for most people.
So our body keeps telling us like it's 12 o'clock, let's get to work or go do something, and
Yeah,
it gins up our system.
yeah, and our body likes to work on on a 24-hour cycle, so a circadian rhythm. So we've got it essentially in our brain. We've got like a master clock, which is called the SCM, which is heavily influenced through the optic nerve and those receptors. So it likes to literally have certain processes it undergoes on a 24-hour cycle, and half of those processes happen when it knows it's nighttime, e.g., when your melatonin is raised and your cortisol's dropped. But those processes all get delayed, right? Because we're delaying or circadian, like it's like a phase shift in our circadian rhythm, because the sun starts set and the brain's like, okay, yeah, it's coming into the evening, cool, because it's taking in light signals all the time, constantly, as the spectrums of the sun change. And then suddenly you flick all the lights on and go, oh, hold on a minute, no, it's not actually, oh, it's midday again. Okay, well, we're not going to do those processes that we do overnight yet. We're going to wait till it's actually is nighttime and the repair and the regeneration happens.
That makes sense. So probably by the time you're about to wake up the next morning, your body's starting to get into that state, and you wake up tired because it's all kind of out of whack.
Yep, absolutely.
So it almost sounds to me too is it's like blue light overdosing.
Yep. During the daytime,
Yeah.
we do overdose in blue light as well, because um, we all live in, most of us living indoor lifestyles. So we're in offices and homes, and we're not outside. And the difference in the spectrum of light is outdoors, we've got blue light, but we've got balanced light. So it's full spectrum. It's got equal amounts of blue, green, yellow, orange, red, infrared, and UV. And it's all in a nice, when you see a spectral graph of it, it's all a nice even mix of all the colors. We come indoors, and because we're using LED devices and lighting, it doesn't actually have all the reds, the yellows, and the oranges. It's got a very narrow bandwidth spike and a very high intensity, intense amount of blue light, which we perceive as white light. So blue light, for simplistic terms, is perceived as a bright white light.
Okay.
And so we're just getting far too much of that single spectrum and not enough of the other colors. And when you look at blue light and other colors on a when you measure it through wavelengths, they're measured in nanometers. So shorter wavelengths, which is blue light, the shorter the wavelength, the higher the amount of energy in it. So the more ability it has to cause oxidative stress on our cells and break down. But that's not really an issue in nature, because it's got red light mixed in it. And red light is longer wavelengths, which are more restorative and healing wavelengths. So when you have them both mixed together, the net effect is it doesn't really do any damage.
Okay.
But when you strip out all that regenerative and healing wavelengths and just have the shorter, more oxidative wavelengths, well, that's when you start to have damage to the cells and oxidative stress. That's why we get digital eye strain, headaches, migraines. They're commonly caused by too much blue light entering and causing damage to our maculas and within the iris.
So is that permanent damage? Do you know? I mean, I know you're not a doctor, and this is not medical advice for those listening, but can that have a negative impact on the muscle and your eye capability?
There is some research coming out now. So it's taken this long, right? Because it's not like you'd be in this environment for a week or even a year, and then suddenly you've destroyed your eyes and damaged them. So there is research coming out now showing that prolonged over screen use over a long number of years, e.g. like 5 to 10 years, will start to cause macular degeneration, and they've actually shown a direct link there. The eye strain and the headaches and the migraines is almost like a warning sign to you. It's like, hey, like your eyes are pissed off and it's not liking it. And you're going to continue to do this over and over. Eventually, yeah, you're going to eventually start to cause some permanent damage.
That is pretty fascinating and kind of concerning too. At the same time, figuring the amount of times we're staring at all these screens for hours on end, 5 to 7 hours a day at least, if not more.
Yeah.
Especially that, and I don't know how old you are. I'm probably a little bit older than you, but uh, I didn't start until my 20s really into staring at all these things. But now there's a generation that is what they're called digital natives that are basically coming out of the womb as they're developing, staring at these lights. So
Yep.
that's also, I guess, not to have a sky falling perspective about it, but it's certainly concerning or can be alarming if we don't handle and really dig into this quickly.
Yeah, well, another actually interesting part to look at is beyond the blue light and the damage and sleep and all that is, say, that the generation that are growing up with these devices is blue light um, is responsible for stimulating dopamine.
Hmm.
Dopamine is like a reward based kind of hormone. So very, very good. That's why we feel good when we go outside and get natural light, right? It's the blue light that certainly helps with mood regulation, but continuous dopamine hits from your screen, it actually creates an addictive feedback loop as well. So your brain is getting rewarded from these hits of blue light all the time. So that's essentially a creates an addiction from a very young age. If you're sitting there on a device getting quite
Yeah.
unnatural amounts of blue light, constantly um, raising your dopamine levels far beyond what they should be raised from natural blue light, then you're literally creating this addictive, and you can see it now. Like, just
Yeah.
if you just walk around in society now, the younger generation are just all sitting there with either a phone or a tablet or something, and it's
Yeah.
almost like, I like to say, it's like you're getting like a blue light hit. It's almost like a drug, right? The brain is just wanting more and more of it. It's expecting it, because now if you don't get it, well then your dopamine levels drop. You're dopamine resistant in a way. Like, you need it to
Yeah.
to to feel normal.
And I mean, for all the parents out there, I'm sure they've all seen it. I mean, anytime you take a toy from a child, it's going to be, probably throw a tantrum, but it seems like it's even worse when it comes to the tablets and not being
Mm,
able to use it, or the constant desire to go back and look at and play something on it. Um, that's, as a parent, I know I've seen some examples of that. Um, but and even for myself too, it was interesting. I was telling a friend a story. We went out to dinner, and I think I left my phone in the car, so I didn't have it with me, which was actually probably a good thing. But then I saw someone at the table pick up their phone, and as soon as I saw that, I reached for my phone, just like
mm,
compulsively, to just go do it. And I'm like, oh man, I need to purge my phone for a minute. I need a digital detox, I think.
yeah, yeah. And it's quite interesting because, like, there is a link, like I said, between literally the blue light and the biological pathways and what it's doing in the brain as well. So it's not only a habit thing. I think that's part of it, but I also think part of it is actually literally,
A draw.
like, if we literally had the same devices and they had all the blue light stripped out, would it be less? Would it create that same addictive nature
Hmm.
as intense as it is? It probably would, to a lesser degree, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about the last 7, 9 years of evolution. That's even an option on some of the phones now,
Hmm.
where you can at least adjust the lighting a little bit to improve that quality or
Yeah,
eliminate.
it's quite interesting because, like, yeah, when we started, that wasn't a thing, and then the first mover was Apple with night shift mode,
Yep.
and I was like, cool, like, finally tech is like catching on to this. But it's like they release these. It's quite interesting. They release these features, but they don't really make a big deal about it. They're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like, you have to like search for someone who's written. It's like there's another hack. You can, like, literally turn your iPhone screen red, right, and strip out 100% of all the blue light and be but Apple doesn't tell you this. Like, they just release the feature on the sly and go, well, hey, it was there. Like, if you didn't use it, that's not our fault. Like, if
Yeah.
this phone screen caused you all this damage, we had the feature in there. So
Like the fine print at the bottom saying we informed you of X, Y, and Z.
yeah, yeah.
So I know we're talking, kind of the negative side of it, I guess, but it's really more illuminating things to folks to become aware, like you were talking earlier. What are some of the methods or things, I know, where your passion comes into now, the purpose and services you offer? What are some of the things that you're doing to kind of help drive that shift in society?
Yeah, so the first thing we try to do on a regular basis is write a lot of educational blog content. Just
Hmm.
so what we're trying to do is, like, break down the science and then put it into more digestible content and with actionable takeaways for people. So that's certainly one thing. The next thing we're looking at, which we haven't quite started yet is like, because after a lot of research around the younger schools and stuff, and going, how can we start to bring that education through at that younger age, and like how can we influence change in schools to ensure that from that aspect that we're getting things right. So it's a whole nother piece of work for us, but it's like creating more like commercial based lighting that can be used in classrooms.
Okay.
That will bring in, because certainly during the daytime it's a different discussion. It's more about like not eliminating it completely, but really altering the spectrums of the light to ensure we're trying to get more closer to like
Yeah,
full
outdoor.
spectrum light. Yeah.
So it's not like you were saying earlier, it's like right now it's basically all blue, where
Yep.
the natural light is kind of paired up with another color.
That's it. So we've actually created like a full spectrum technology light bulb that we currently sell, but it's more for like a residential based fit out. So you can change all the lights in your home. Like these are the ones that are on behind me. So these are I've actually got them on a warmer setting at the moment, but we've got them so we can change them to different settings based on the different times of the day. So you can essentially replicate the different spectrums of the sun
Okay.
based on morning through to midday through to late afternoon and right into the evening. And so we are able to switch our ones through. So that kind of like what I call like circadian based lighting.
Yeah.
I think if we can start to and this is what we're trying, a big piece of work we want to do is like look at, so schools and workplaces are like huge, right? Because and these are like, these are places that the individual can't control.
Yeah.
So you're like, regardless of whether you know all this stuff and you're like, I want to, you're
You
like,
have
you're
to go to
forced,
work, right? Yeah, people are going to go to work and
and
they're
you're
going to.
forced, and you're forced into an environment that's not so good for your health. So it's like if we can get into more of the workplaces and get them to understand the problem and go, hey, do you understand? Like if we use this type of lighting, it's going to burn your staff out. They're going to have migraines. They're going to have highly anxious and too much cortisol. Or
Mhm.
we could use this type of lighting. You're going to get more productivity out of them. They're going to be healthier, happier, and so that's the really big approach that we want to take. And also, doing that into the schools as well and going, but the issue with them is, like I said, we need to actually create the right type of more commercial based lighting that's actually going to do that. So at the moment, we're really, really focused in on residential. So we've literally got a solution of one shape or form of lighting to fit out your whole home in all different aspects, from overhead lighting to motion lights to reading lights to book lights to lamps, all these things that interface into the way we interact with light in the evening. We've pretty much got a solution for you that will work in your home now. So I think the next step for us is continuing to educate the people, average person on light and how it impacts them, and then they can start to make changes in their home. But then also, how can we influence people in schools and workplaces to bring that in for their staff as well?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, it made me think. One way to get that available is even work in the commercial space of like interior designers. I say that because my wife is one, because she's
Mm,
always talking about lighting and how important it is. Not, but she from the aesthetic standpoint, and
mm,
it's more appealing, and if you have the right lighting. And so that to me seems like a pretty good opportunity there to work with that community base, uh,
mm.
who are in the home.
We are doing a lot of work with like the tiny home movement, eco homes, off grid, all
Yeah,
those kind of communities.
they're bought in
Kind
with the concept already.
Yeah, well, they kind of get it, I think, a little bit. Like they're like, okay, I kind of there's other aspects of like the world that are unhealthy for us, and they kind of get like lighting is one of them. So we're certainly trying to, and like off grid is an interesting one because it runs a different power. You've got to run like DC 12 volt normally, so we're getting constant requests for that. So we're trying to work out, okay, how can we actually service that community as well and come up with solutions for them. But yeah, interior design is one, architects as well, and
Mhm.
like designing homes, and electricians as well. So yeah, we're trying to look beyond just trying to educate everyone, us to them, but how can we actually go into more influential people in different communities and groups of people and start to get them to understand and hopefully then look at how they can integrate that through the services they offer as well.
Yeah, awesome. That's encouraging to hear. How can folks find more about what you're doing, and especially on the educational side of things?
Yeah, so we've got a website, so it's just blockbluelight.com is our website. On there, we've got like a learn section, blogs. There's probably about 100 of them now. So it can be a bit overwhelming looking at them all, but um, there's just also a wealth of knowledge throughout the website on all the different products and the specifications and understanding what you do and don't need to look for in them. Another thing though is just, yeah, if anyone like you're on there and it's all a bit overwhelming trying to understand it all,
Mhm.
reach out to us, email, chat. Like we love it. People normally will give us this certain circumstance of like their living situation or whatever, and we can normally help them or guide them and like, hey, these are probably the things you want to look at and what you could do to interface into your own life to help.
Awesome. So, have I missed anything? Key points that people could benefit from?
Um, yeah, one thing I would say is like some key things that people can do like that doesn't some of them don't even cost anything is like the first thing would be like um first thing in the morning get outside, like just get outside only if you've even got 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes is good. Just get outside and get that morning sunshine into the eyes. So that helps you anchor your circadian rhythm. So regardless of whether you do all the wrong things during the day, it's almost a bit of a reset to the brain. Oh yeah, the sun's rising or the sun has just risen, it's morning. So it's a way of continuing to anchor the circadian rhythm. So that's one thing that everyone should be doing regardless. The next thing is like people, I guess, might start looking into this sort of stuff and like, okay, yeah, I've heard like blue light's bad, I've got to block it. Um, but and so they'll start like villainizing it and looking at all these different ways to, oh, I've got to get it out of my life, and that's not quite the case. So it's all about context and time of the day and the amount. So I'd also say beyond that, trying to get as much during the day, as much natural light as possible to try and at least mitigate the indoor lifestyles we're living and all the devices and stuff. So if you're not going to go out and buy particular glasses and lighting and all that, it's like, well, you can still re reverse a lot of the damage and the effects if we just get outside. So
Yeah.
and even if it's just like 5 minutes during the day, lunchtime, go for a walk outside. These are all things that will help as well. So again, they don't cost anything. They're free and they're just as powerful as the removal and the blocking and doing all that stuff at night. But just it's not only a problem of receiving the wrong spectrums at night and day, but it's also blocking them out. It's also we're not getting enough of the beneficial spectrums as well. So like
Yeah.
things like SAD and seasonal affective disorder are quite prominent now. And that's a depression that's 100% governed by light, which is quite interesting. Like it is. It's like there's no. You look at all the research and on it, it's all to do with your light exposure and lack thereof. So um, yeah,
Literally, the prescription is go outside.
get light and get more light, right?
Yeah.
So
And here's a mental trigger that I learned that, especially on overcast days this winter, it's kind of overcast here in Virginia, and it doesn't look bright out. And you're like, okay, it's brighter inside. Well, it's not about the brightness though, as we just learned. But also, I think it was Andrew Huberman was talking about is it lumens or lux or something like that?
Lux, yeah.
Lux. And like it indoor, even in its best, is like 1,000. Outdoor on like a sunny day is still 10x that, or so. I may be getting the
Yep.
numbers wrong. It was like 10,000
Yep.
compared to like 1,000 or two, even on an overcast, like dark midday.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's lux, which is the measurement of the brightness of the light. So yeah, it's like indoors, the average illuminated room is like 500 to 1,000 lux.
Mhm.
Sunny day outside is over 20,000 lux, easy. Just an overcast day is on average, like if it was just like an overcast day, it'd still be around like 5 to 10,000 lux. So people go, oh yeah, and that's quite an interesting one because like, oh, it's overcast and it's dull outside. but there's a hell of a lot more light out there still than your indoor environment. And so we're just living in this very under illuminated environment with the wrong spectrums at the same time. So
Yeah.
so that's why, like, even regardless of the weather or the season, outdoor light is still going to have such a significant benefit over being indoors.
So even if it's overcast, get out there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
That's it.
Daniel, man, I really appreciate your passion and what you're doing with your company and helping people. Because again, I think we're so early in this tech boom. It seems like it's been around for a long time, 20 years, but it's really not from the medical perspective, as you pointed out. So I really appreciate that. I'd like to close things out with some personal questions, nothing too heavy. But what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I'm actually reading, rereading it, which it's just helped me in business and life. It's called Tools of Titans by Tim Ferris. So I've
Yes.
read it before, but I was just going back through it all. Because it's one of those things you've got to digest little bits at a time, different people. So yeah, I've actually just started going back through that.
Cool. That's good. Yeah, I've got the book as well, and it was a key catalyst actually to even starting the podcast. Reading a bunch of people on the health and wellness side of things. So cool. So what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
Uh, Podcast. I've got a bunch that I just have. So big ones are like Ben Greenfield, Luke Story.
Mhm.
Who else do I have on there? Those are probably yeah. To be honest, I don't have much time these days, but those are the ones I normally just like check in on and see what they're talking about. Yeah. So
Yeah. All right. And last one. So what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
that's an easy one for me. It's in the evening, just shutting down all the tech, all the lighting, and having some real warm ambient lighting with no blue light and reading, at least, and it's switching the mind off.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and expertise, and look forward to seeing where you and your company go.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, and hope your listeners find this valuable.